Hi, friends. Chris Godfredson with the Brimstone Coaching Group, and I'm here today on the Brimstone Coaching Podcast with my friend and co-founder, Kurt Bush. And Kurt, I'm pretty sure that you feel like I do today, at least today. And and we're really excited to have this conversation. Today, we are welcoming people who I'd say have significantly influenced our lives. They have played a part in our transformational journey. We've been coached by each of them,
Yeah.
and uh, we would not even have ever engaged this transformational work. Now, maybe, I mean, God would do what God would want to do, but I wonder if we would have engaged the work that we um, have done if it weren't for Jim Herrington and Trisha Taylor from the Leader's Journey. They're going to join us and we're going to have a conversation with them. And over the course of these last couple of podcasts, we've been talking about the ideas of being defined and connected and how significant that is. We'll get to that at the end of the podcast, but the initial part of the conversation is going to be one around how systems and organizations are really valuing this work of developing and being transformed. So we hope that you enjoy the conversation. Is there anything you want to say before we dive into the conversation with Jim and Trisha? Kurt?
I mean, I just want to echo it. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it's overstating that the Brimstone Coaching Group can be tracked back, like the lineage of Brimstone Coaching Group tracks back to Jim and Trisha. I find myself in this conversation. So we're doing this opening in reverse. We're kind of time traveling, but I find myself in this conversation feeling a deep sense of gratitude to them and for them, but also sort of fanboying at the same time.
Is it hard not to?
It's so, because I'm so grateful for their work. I love their work. And I could just listen to them all day. So
I love them, right?
I love them.
Love their work. I love them.
Yes.
They're so good at what they do, and they're so gracious in it. And I think, friends, that you're in for a treat.
Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the Brimstone Coaching Podcast. I'm Kurt. I'm here with Chris, and Chris and I are here with just two amazing friends and colleagues of ours, Jim Herrington and Trisha Taylor. We just are so pumped to have you guys on, and we just want to start our time with saying thank you, and we're glad you're here. And let's just kick it right in. Who are you, and what do you want to say about the organization that you run?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say we've known you guys for a long time. We are just so jazzed that you asked us to come on your podcast, and I just want to remind you that you've said you're going to come on our podcast, so
we're going to see how this goes, Trisha.
There you go.
Good try.
We get to have you on the hot seat soon, but we're really happy to be here. So we are the Leader's Journey, Jim Herrington, Trisha Taylor. And I think the thing that people might be surprised about is that even though the Leader's Journey in its current form was only born in 2018, so 6 years ago, we have actually been working together since the last century. If you want to let that, maybe
isn't that amazing? There was a century before zero.
The 1900s.
Exactly, back in the 1900s, we have been working together. We started working together in Houston. That's where we're based. Back in, I think, 1997, when I went to go work for an organization that Jim was at the head of, that back then that was an association of about 400 to 500 Baptist churches here in the Houston area, and Jim was the executive director. I came on to work as a therapist, and so that tells you a little bit about our story. I'll let Jim say more about that for himself in a minute. But and we wrote a book together with our friend Robert Creech. That kind of took off, opened up lots of these opportunities. That came out in its first edition in 2003. So, and then was re-released just recently in a second edition, and also by the name of The Leader's Journey. And I would say that so you have two people that have worked together pretty closely. We can literally say for decades. And
Yes.
all the things that we do in our own relationship and in our own with our own team. We got to know you guys in a binational denominational effort over that lasted about 10 years as we worked on this kind of work with y'all. We've done that with lots of other organizations, again, in all parts of the US and into Canada. And we love that this is the work that we get to do. I know y'all feel the same way about yours.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Jim used to post stuff on Facebook like, I love my job. I love what I get to do every day. And I'm like, sure you do, because I was writing checks and because I know what you get. And that's not fair. I wasn't writing the checks, but I was helping doing the funding piece. And like now as we're doing in our iteration of the work that you're doing is like there's so much joy in that.
There is.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. I just want to say personally, I wear a couple of hats. I've been a counselor in private practice with a state license for all of that time. I'm married to a pastor who's been a pastor for all the 39 years we've been married. And I'm also ordained, and I'll let Jim say what he wants to say about the hats he wears.
Yeah, so I would just add to what Trisha said about the leader's journey that we do three things. We do individual executive coaching. We do leadership development for groups of people in congregations and in the business world. And then we do some consultation. We did that with the denomination that you guys are a part of at the national level. We work with Vineyard USA is one of the clients that we get the opportunity to work with. And so we do all of those things. And I'm married to Betty. We've been married 51 years. We have 5 kids and 6 grandkids. Been in Houston 40 years. And I think the thing that's been so much fun about working with Trisha is that we have worked together several decades, and we started doing that at about the time the pace of change began to pick up. And the learning, having a learning partner to say things are changing. What does that mean about personal transformation? What does that mean about organizational transformation? And how do you keep evolving your thinking about that? And she's been a great learning partner, and that's been a lot of fun all along the way.
Can I say something, Kurt? This is what we do. Sorry.
I like that you asked permission.
Trisha,
I'm not ever going to do that.
Yeah, that's okay.
But one of the transformational things about learning with and from you, I remember a moment in time where you received some information that you hadn't considered before. And as you did it, you're like, I have to think differently about that because I watched you challenge all of the preconceived notions that you had. I don't remember what the topic was, but I just remember I was stopped in my tracks. It was like, they don't seem stirred up right now. And in fact, like they're open to considering something in a new way. And like my mind was blown in the moment. And it's a thing to behold. And it's something that, boy, I just deeply desire, A, for myself, and B, for the world. Like, can we be open to that kind of learning?
But that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, just going in with a bag of tricks, that's no fun. But and this is maybe the more formal way that we would say that, but I think it relates to what you just said. At the Leader's Journey, we want to help leaders. We want to help you see yourself. We want to help you see your system. And then we want to help you see yourself in your system. And that's always changing, right? I mean, by definition, systems are always changing. And so being able to just kind of be in that flow, that's the fun part.
Yeah, I remember. So Trisha, I met you before I met Jim, and I remember being at a retreat. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I remember like I was early on in my own sort of self-work, and Chris had kind of drugged me into this self-work because I didn't need it, right? I didn't need
Right.
this. So I remember sitting at this retreat, hearing you talk about how the phrase churches learning change actually means like I'm going to change, I'm going to be transformed.
Right.
And this like paradigm shift to think like, oh, I have some ability and agency to lean into my own transformation for the sake of the system. And I just remember that being so formative. And I just want to say for the listener, if you don't own a copy of The Leader's Journey, get one.
Yes.
This is pretty regular reading for groups that I lead. This is consistory reading for sure. So thanks for putting it out there for us. It is truly a gift.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad.
So I have a couple questions for you. We want to pick your brain a little bit and hear a little bit about the work that you do. One thing that I would say is, as I began to swim in these waters, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, this work of transformation and this work of self-awareness, I found it largely in the church. That this was not a super corporate mindset. In fact, I spent a lot of time in corporate world, and this language would have never ever been welcome. This work of transformation, the work that you do, but I've heard you say that's starting to shift a little bit. That this isn't limited to the church world. That you're seeing more and more work with corporate world. Would you want to say a little bit about that shift?
Sure. I'd start by saying we were leading some work at a church in Chicago, and the executive vice president of our architectural firm came up to us and said, y'all do this in the business world? This would be really helpful in our company. And that led to a half-day retreat with their executive team that led to a 2-day retreat with 18 of their key leaders. And today we're coaching everybody in the company and participating in their strategy planning retreats, and like we're real partners with them. And that kind of opened up the door for us to the corporate world. I would say that that's changing pretty dramatically. Maybe the way to get a glimpse at it, the Harvard Business Review wrote an article, maybe that I've shared with you, this entitled Employee Value Proposition. And here's what they say. Old guys like me, when we went to work, all we expected was a paycheck. To be treated fairly. We'd work 60, 70 hours a week. We'd neglect our family. We'd do whatever it took to get the job done if we got our paycheck. And today there is just a growing amount of research with every younger generation that they've identified 4 things that folks are expecting from their workplace. They're expecting a good job with a good paycheck. They're expecting to be developed as leaders, not like, I want you to do the job you're doing now better, but how do we help you with your career track? How do we get you into a C-suite somewhere? What are the skills that you need to develop, and how does that happen? They want a sense of community. They want a sense of, if we're going to spend 8 or 10 hours a day with a group of people, we want there to be places where we can, drink coffee or eat beer, or drink beer.
Hey, that's a new one for me. I like a dark beer, but
or do barbecues together. Like, we want there to be a sense of community. And the 4th thing is that they want to be able to see that their particular work contributes to the mission of the organization, and that the organization's mission is making a difference in the world. And so you can go to almost any business school you want to go to's website, and you'll find that on there, that increasingly, where, Kurt, you were saying earlier that back in the day when you were in the corporate world, that wasn't accepted. It's almost becoming expected these days. And for me, there's one more piece that I would add, and that is that that there in the Christian world, in the church world, there has been a growing movement that I've been a part of for, I don't know, 15 years, that I call work as mission. And so guys that Trisha and I worked with here in Houston began to say, my mission is my work. And so, so it's not just having a job or getting a paycheck, but it's how do we contribute to the world being a better place? How do we make in the business world, in the educational world, in the law enforcement world? How do I take my relationship to God and my, the gifting that I've been given? How do I take that and make a difference in the world that we live in? So all of that would be how I would start that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, Trisha, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, everything Jim said that he said so well, I think all of that is true. And I think it comes out of our understanding of just how humans are designed.
Right.
We're designed to learn and grow. When my grandfather died, not too long ago, we went back to his house, and one of the things we found that surprised us was this huge binder. I mean, I'm talking about, several inches binder. And in that binder, he had dozens of certificates from courses he had taken at his little country church. And he had kept every single one of those certificates. And I thought, he wasn't a particularly religious man. I don't think that, but what that expressed at that time in his life was the church was where you could go to learn things, and to grow in some way and to add to your life. And work was the place, like Jim said, you went to get a paycheck. But I think we're designed to want to grow and to learn. And I think, the corporate world is just figuring out, that's what humans are made for. I think it's terrific. That period of time where we were working with more lay people and especially business leaders here in Houston through a ministry called Faith Walking, and seeing them take all of these concepts, all truth is God's truth, right? So seeing them take these concepts and take them back into their workplaces and then come back and say, this changes everything.
Well,
that's exciting.
And what's so interesting to me about that is that when Trisha and I and Steve Capper founded this ministry called Faith Walking, and the very first retreat we did had 19 business guys in it that we had known through our work at UBA and through the work that we did at Harbor Church and some stuff like that. And here was what they said to us. And I had to translate this over time. But what they said to us was, we want to be on mission in our workplace, and our church doesn't help us with that. And so the Faith Walking ministry grew out of an attempt to help business guys, and it evolved over time and is both in the church and in the business world. But what I began to realize as I just reflected on that and continued doing the work was that for generations, the church had been driven by a church growth model that said we reach people who then could come to serve the church. And it's shifting. I mean, it's shifting we're working with some churches that are doing some amazing things in cities, particularly in the Midwest and that part of the country where we work. Where the churches are beginning to ask the question, how do we equip people to be on mission in the world? Now, it's a challenge because you've got to have people who will take care of do the children's ministry and the youth ministry, and you've got to have deacons, all that kind of stuff. But more and more, I think churches that are pastored by younger men and women are the folks who are beginning to say, how do we equip people to be on mission in the world that they live in?
I mean, the church also is a sending place, right? I mean, so the mental model that says we have a large front door and no back door, or no sending capacity is doomed.
Well, and mostly we think about sending is if you're not going to be on the church staff, then we send you as a missionary. But we never think about, let's send this school principal. Let's send her or him. Let's send this guy who owns a business, or let's send this guy who's a police officer to be on mission in their workplace. That's changing, and I'm really encouraged by that. It's changing slowly, but it's changing.
Maybe for the listener, if they're new to that language, how would you define being sent on mission if you're that principal? What can that look like if you're the leader's journey? How do you define that for that principle?
Well, I might just start by saying that that God's big idea in the world isn't that more people are in church on Sunday morning, but that God has this vision of a world. I'm pretty sure. And I'm married to a pastor, and we like it when people are in church on Sunday morning.
Sure.
And I think God has this vision of a world where relationships are restored and where the systems in our world work the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And I think this is all through scripture, but the thing that's fun is that it's also in all the research coming out of the business world, right?
Yes.
It's all
Yeah.
the same that says that we're all designed to want to do big things. We're designed to want to make a difference. Maybe I like that better than doing big things. We're all designed to want to make a difference and to make this difference, not in how many widgets get sold, in some market on the other side of the world, but to make a difference in making the world a better place and in our relationships. And we can put all kinds of fancy language around that, but that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Well, here's a practical story that puts a face on what Trisha just said. My wife was a kindergarten teacher for most of her adult life. Three times she was chosen Teacher of the Year in this inner city school that she served in. And up until we began to do this work, if you'd ask her, what is your mission? She would have said, to be the best kindergarten teacher I can be. And as we began to get exposed to the missional world, that began to change for her. And she began to ask and answer the question, how do I help the school that I teach in become what God intends to? Like even asking the question, what does God intend for this the school was a new question for her. And, the short form of a long story is that working with the principal, they came to decide that one of the most important needs in the school was to have mentors. And so Betty and a team of teachers formed a team in the community that had leaders from two churches. It had the civic leaders, one of their team members. It had people from the community that formed a team. And then there was a business just across the freeway that was encouraging their people to find public service kind of ways. And within about a year, they had 45 mentors who were coming where before they had not had any. And I mean, that's just one example of what is God's intended purpose and what's missing here, and how do we use the network of relationships and the influence that we have to help meet that need. And that's a working example for me of what it looks like.
Yeah.
I remember a particular business that we had connection with who mostly had hourly employees, but they paid those hourly employees if they wanted to go mentor in any school. They could get their hourly paycheck during that time if they wanted to go mentor. That's pretty remarkable.
Right.
I think this is one thing that I so appreciate about the both of you, is that all of this work has such tremendous impact on us and our families and our circles, all this work that we do. But you have both always said, like, this is for the sake of the world, right? Like, this is for the shalom, the redemption of all the places that we are. And I love that. I think that's so important. So maybe connected to this question, here's a wondering, well, maybe we should take a break. Is it break time, Chris?
Yeah, it is break time, Kurt.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, well, welcome back. Again, Chris and I are here with Trisha Taylor and Jim Herrington from The Leader's Journey. Maybe another question that I wonder about that maybe the listener would want to hear some things about is this question of what would you say to an organization that says, you know what, we know everybody's kind of faking it till they make it. We know that everybody is kind of looking out for number one, kind of just doing all the things. And we're going to send the most widgets we can across the globe. And that's enough. That's all we care about. That's all we're here for. What would you want to say to that ambiguous, nebulous organization?
I would say, how's that working for you?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
How's your workforce? Are you maintaining help?
Right.
Given what Jim said early, right? I mean,
right. Right. Pretty early on, it becomes clear that the younger the workforce is, the more they're not going to tolerate that. And so either
Yeah.
they won't come to work for you, or they come to work for you for a little while, and then they realize this is not the place I want to be, and they go find somewhere else. And the cost to the company and the turnover of the employees, I mean, just onboarding a new employee costs a lot of money in companies,
Yeah.
and that affects the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that the leader of a company like that is likely to be either really unimaginative, in which case
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of hope for that company
Right.
because
Yeah.
the world just demands so much more adaptation. Or that's a narcissistic leader. Everybody in this business exists for me to, feel important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to change that particular, the head of that business, because that's not likely to change.
Yeah.
I would say to people, go somewhere else, right? Find a place. When I think Sheryl Sandberg was the first person I heard say, bring your whole self to work, that is the way that business has to exist today. We have to be able to bring our whole selves to work. And so I wouldn't say to somebody working in one of those businesses, go on the mission field or, to find meaning. I would say
Yeah.
find a place
Yeah.
that, and if you can't find that place wherever you are in that organization that you described, Kurt, find a way to be different.
Yeah.
Find
That's
a way
really
to
good.
show up as someone who brings their whole self to work and encourages and allows and invites other people to do the same thing.
And persist in that over time.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a friend, like a 30-year-old woman who is in the tech world. Her name is Kelsey Kemp, and now she's a career coach. And she talked about leading her, like pushing her way up or leading up. Can I get lunch with my manager? Can I get lunch with the leader of the organization and talk about these are the things that give me life. These are the things I like to do, and these are the things I don't. Is there room for that here as I bring my whole self to my work? And it led to some transitions for her, and it led to her helping other people do this kind of thing. So yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. So you may not be able to change the whole company, but you might be able to change your department or your silo. And that might be, a little piece of heaven on earth in the middle of that larger organization.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what would you? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
I'll just say one more thing. I do think what y'all are onto in those last paragraph or so is that we can look at a company and say, this company's not doing what I want it to do. But one of the things that we believe really deeply about systems and changing systems is if you want to change a system, the highest leverage thing you can do is change the way you show up in the system.
Yes.
And so it's not all on the company. I have some responsibility as well. And that doesn't mean you don't look for a company that shares your values and that sort of thing, but it's also going to require some persistence and some intentionality and some increasing your pain tolerance, as we would say, in order to be able to make that happen.
Can I ask a question, Kurt?
Yeah, please.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
When you So I think it was you, Jim, who introduced me to Robert Keegan and the everyone culture and this idea of places being deliberately developmental. Like I think that's what I hear when you talk about these younger people and what they're looking for in a marketplace. So you mentioned was it an architect firm that you're working with in Chicago? Like they weren't necessarily deliberately developmental when you began to work with them, but it sounds as though they are now. How would you describe that, or what would you say about helping a system down that path?
Yeah, well, what I would say about the particular system that you're talking about was they had a culture where they were committed to learning. They did an annual
Mm.
Okay.
performance review that was done by a
Yep.
national organization. And part of
Hmm.
what the executive vice president at the time said to us when he asked us if we could help, he said, we get good scores on almost everything except these three things. And we've tried and tried and tried.
Mm.
We hadn't been able to move the needle. And we think you could help with that. And so there was already that.
Sure.
But I
Okay.
think if you talk to them today, that what they would say is that the individual work that we've done, we coach about 40 people of the 55 that are in their
Mm.
company. They
Mm.
offer coaching to everybody.
Yep.
And what they would say is that the growing emotional maturity of their people,
Mm.
having a safe place outside of the company when things
Yes.
don't go well, to vent, to turn the
Yeah.
volume down on all their emotions so that they can actually think about what it looks like for them to act in a principled kind of way. That just universally they would say, I mean, they do
Mm.
say all the time
Yeah.
what a significant contribution that's
Mm.
been.
And it makes a monetary contribution. I mean, there is a
Totally. Of
financial
course.
payoff. There is a
Yeah.
higher
Yeah.
return on investment
Yeah.
because of people in the organization doing that work.
Yep.
Right, because they become more productive, right? They're not faking it till they make it any longer. You know, Kurt will talk
Yeah.
about white knuckling it, and like if we're working two jobs constantly, the one we're paid to do and the other one, it's just so not helpful, and it's well worth any company's investment. Yeah.
Yeah, I describe it like this. Imagine that you have 100 units of energy to bring to work today.
Mm.
And 30 units of that energy is spent managing anxiety and doing the politics of the company. Then that's
Yeah.
30 units you don't have to get your work done. And
Yeah.
that impacts the bottom line. And now imagine that the company has 100 units of energy to use, and the company is spending 30% of its energy dealing with anxiety and all of that kind of stuff. And so the more you can grow individual and corporate capacity, Daniel Goleman's work around emotional intelligence, which is kind of at the center of most of what we do, says you can't change your IQ, but when you're talking about IQ, EQ, technology, and business plan, that the thing that matters the most, research based, the thing that matters the most is growing people's emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good.
And people are people and systems are systems. And so what we're saying, if you're talking about your family, if you're talking about your neighborhood, if you're talking
Yeah.
about your church, if you're talking about your business, what we're saying here applies in all of those settings.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good and really hard, right? So here's a question I have. I love the idea of bringing your whole self to work, to insert place here. I imagine there's probably some listeners that are like, well, I don't know if I can do that. That feels pretty hard.
Yeah.
How does a person begin to even imagine bringing their whole self to work?
Yeah, I don't think they have to start with whatever the thing was that came into their mind when they started thinking about bringing, there's kind of a worst case scenario there, right?
Yeah.
Like I can bring all of myself except that one thing. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think you have to start with that one thing. I think it just means approaching work or whatever system, like Jim said, wanting to be awake and fully alive in that place, and risking that I don't have to go into that place and, as Brene Brown says, hustle for worthiness. I can walk in as myself and trust that what I have to offer here is valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to snap on
Yeah.
that.
Well, and I think one of the things that makes our work different than what we know about a lot of coaches and consultants out there is that we view everything as a developmental process, right? It's not like I'm not bringing my whole self to work and now I'm bringing my whole self. But let's think about, okay, if you're acting like a 3-year-old at work, let's figure out what it takes to act like a 5-year-old.
Yes.
You don't punish your
Yeah.
children for not being grown-ups. You help them
Yeah.
move to the next stage. And so,
Mm.
and part of what that means is that we end up being in long-term relationships with people like with you guys. And
Mhm.
it's like there's a kind, I mean, this may seem inappropriate, but there's kind of a love affair with your clients. You know, we love the people we work with, and
Yeah.
we've watched them grow and develop over a long period of time. And so the answer to almost any question you
Yeah.
ask around the how-to is there's a developmental process, and it's going to be
Right.
slow, steady over the long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah, God
That-
can do this, right? I mean, like, could snap the metaphorical fingers and you could be different. And one of those things that, I mean, we were sitting around a table with a bunch of college students before we met with you today, and like Kurt had just held up that transformational learning model that says it, you know, in essence, it just says it's slow and it happens over time. And so
Mhm.
we'll give you some information, go try it on and reflect on it. And right, I mean,
Perfect.
yeah.
So I have two experiences. My father-in-law was an alcoholic who came to Christ and overnight quit drinking and quit smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day overnight. A
Wow.
miracle. And then I have 17 years at Harbor Church, where we were living in community with people who were in drug and alcohol addiction. We were doing all the same things to introduce them to relationship to God and all of that. And for almost all of them, it was a slow, long-term process, a learning process.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why God does that. Like with, I'm
Yeah.
glad he did that with my father-in-law. I'm not sure why that's the case, where so often for most of us, it is a long, slow learning process.
Yeah.
What I would say to that hypothetical person that you mentioned, Kurt, is that our part of that long, slow process is just to be willing to one of the ways we say this is to be willing to go to right to the edge of your comfort zone
Mhm.
and just
Yeah.
take one more step.
Yeah.
Right? Just one more step outside your comfort zone. And as a practice, as an experiment, look around, see what happens when you do that.
Yeah.
What happens if you do that more than once? What happens if that becomes a way of life and so forth? You know, the way adults change is through disruption for the
Mm.
most part. And so sometimes, yeah, something happens in our lives and it's a big event and it changes everything. And we are different after that. And
Yep.
yep, that happens. But mostly what happens is that we have to disrupt
Right.
whatever that autopilot is in ourselves that makes us want to hide or pretend or,
Yeah.
not show up,
Mm.
and the willingness to just disrupt that one step outside our comfort zone at a time.
And as you do that, you've got to, I have this saying that the gap between expectation and reality is always filled with anxiety.
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
if I go with the expectation that I'm going to take this one step, this one experiment, and things are going to work. I had a client say to me one day, I must be doing the wrong thing. This is really hard. This is not going well. And I said, well,
Mhm.
that could be true, but what could be true is you could be doing exactly like your brain. It
Yeah.
requires some hard work to get a new habit developed. And the fact that
Yep.
it's hard may be an indication that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I think what I've always appreciated about your invitation, Trisha, to take one step to have this sort of gentle process of developing is that what I find is that allows me to continue, right? This is not my comfort zone changes, and that allows me then
Right.
a continual process that isn't just I'm going to step out once and I'll reap the benefits and bear the fruit that one time provides.
Mhm.
It's a continual process. So I've always
Yeah, there's
appreciated that.
there's some permission giving in that, and the expectation like is not perfection.
Right.
We're not going to
Yeah.
do it perfectly. We're not going to be able to do that every
Yeah.
time. We're going to mess up and then try again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that feels like a good spot for another break. So let's pause, take a little break. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, friends. Again, if you're just hopping in here, I'm here with Chris. I'm Kurt. We've got Trisha Taylor and Jim Herrington with us. Guys, there's one concept that you have taught us over the years. You would call it being defined and connected. Some of the podcasts coming out ahead of this one, Chris and I are talking about how to name what's so for us, especially in a season like an election season that is going to bring with it all sorts of tension and anxiety. I wonder what you want to say about the importance of being defined and connected, being able to define yourself and stay connected to people that might define themselves differently. Why is this such an important practice to develop?
I think it's everything. I really do. I think it's
Yep.
everything. I think to the extent that we can do that, we grow emotionally, we grow spiritually, our world works better, our relationships work better, we're
Mm.
happier and healthier. I mean, for me, that is the thing.
Right.
Yeah, I if, I think often theologically about the body of Christ and how what the scripture says is that there are these parts, and one can't say to the other, "We don't have any need of you."
Yeah.
And
Mm.
when we're all connected, there's something that happens that doesn't happen otherwise. And so I'm defining myself when I'm being my part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm connected
Mm.
when I'm being connected to somebody who is different than I am.
Mm.
And what I've watched in the church over my lifetime is that with all of the anxiety that's in our societal system, is that more and more churches tend to be all the hands are in this church and all the
Mhm.
feet are in this church and my
Yeah.
eyes are over here. And nobody believes that if I cut my hand off and laid it on the counter over there, that it would be a part of the body.
Yeah.
And what I also recognize is that for some people, being defined is it comes more naturally, and you'll
Yep.
do that at the expense of being connected. And for other
Mm.
people, being connected is more important, and you'll do that at the expense of being defined.
Yeah.
And I mean, as Trisha said, that's everything. I mean, everywhere that I coach, everybody that I work with, when you see somebody growing their capacity to define themselves and be connected, it changes
Mm.
their family. I have a guy that I'm coaching in a workplace who said, "I had no idea that this work was going to impact my relationship to my son
Right.
that I've been disconnected from for 2 years."
Mm.
Mm.
Right? I mean, I just think Trisha says it's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do you think it's so hard? Or
Good question.
why do we
Yeah.
polarize why do we allow ourselves to get polarized?
Well, this is where I want people to understand that it is legitimately hard. It's not just hard
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
because there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong
Mhm.
with you. It is legitimately hard. And two reasons, there are lots of reasons.
Mhm.
One reason is each of us are just individuals in a much larger system.
Yeah.
And that's one reason we want to help people see the system. None of us,
Mhm.
we think we're all individuals, just operating autonomously, but we're not. So that's one
Mhm.
reason, because systems forces are pushing on us hard.
Yeah.
The other reason is in our brains. Our brains literally perceive difference as threat.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
think of all kinds of reasons why we've developed for that and why that's good for our survival as the human race and so forth. But in a relationship with another person, two things are happening. One part is maybe I genuinely want to be connected to this person who's different from me, who thinks differently or looks differently. And maybe I genuinely see the value in that, and I'm coming at it with some humility and openness. And my brain is not going to go along with that. My
Yeah.
brain, my nervous system is going to react as if I'm in the presence of danger.
Mhm.
And that's just true. And so, Kurt, you mentioned the political climate in our world today. What would happen if all of us thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to practice, being the kind of person that I want to be under difficult circumstances, because that's really what the political climate is offering us, a chance to, within the system, using these brains that we have that sometimes get in the way, really practice some new things rather than how do I double down and try to make
Yeah.
everybody else as right as I think I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think what's changed for me over a lifetime has been the belief that the apex of what it means to be a Christian is that you have the capacity to love your enemy.
Mm.
And not when you get saved. It is the
Yeah.
language we use in my tradition. Not when you get
Yeah.
saved,
Mhm.
but that there's this lifelong process of increasingly growing your capacity to be with people who see the world differently than you do.
Yeah.
And that's a learned skill that maybe you can only get to the enemy love, as you get older. But when we give that up as a goal, Jesus didn't just give us that because it was hard or an interesting thing to do. He gave us that because when we're develop the capacity to love our enemy, the world flourishes. Our communities flourish, our systems flourish. And I think that's the work. I mean, I just think that's the work.
Yeah, 100%. And Brene Brown, so you dropped her a while ago, Trisha, but like she has this great line, like, I think the world would be a better place if we just assumed like everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have at their disposal, right? And if we can see people like that as fellow image bearers, they're doing the best they can, and the problem isn't out there, it's in here and all of the things. I just remember how I had very little. I mean, I remember my first, one of my learning experiences was with a systems thinker, and he was a chaplain, and I was working in these hospitals in a city, and he was teaching systems theory, and I was like, and he just like, I was resistant, and I was like, nope, it's like this and not that. And I would love to have a conversation with him today. Like, actually, no, like the world is a better place, and the world misses out when I think the world missed out on me when I was threatened. When I was threatened to be able to be in a relationship with somebody who thought differently than I did, because if they're right, then that makes me wrong, and my whole world crashes down. And that's not actually true, but that's some of the stuff I would tell myself, and like, boy, it's okay to maybe not be right all the time.
Yeah, I remember having lunch with a colleague of mine years before I started any of this work. Like, I think God was setting the table a little bit. I was at lunch with this guy who believed different than me, and we kind of knew that, but we would just kind of steer clear of things that we knew we were different on. And there was a really important importance wrong word, a high impact political moment that we were sort of debating, and he asked the question one time at lunch in a restaurant. We were eating wings together. He said, "How does this impact your life?" And what he was asking was, why can't I believe different than you? And why can't we just eat our wings together and believe differently? Again, I didn't know he was inviting me to be defined and connected. But I can look back now and say, like, that was the very first moment where I began to wonder, like, why am I clutching some things so much to the point that they, as you said, Jim, harm my connection?
I love that question. How does this affect your life? That's a question we need to ask each other. Sometimes we need a real answer. Sometimes we have the realization that you had. Another question might be, why am I mad about this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I know what I think, and I'm listening to what you think. Why do I have to be mad about it? And that's our nervous system hijacking us, right? But if I can learn to kind of regulate myself and say, okay, this important political thing that we're talking about right now, we could just say, let's not talk about it. Let's agree to disagree. And sometimes that is absolutely the way to go.
Sure.
But we could keep talking about it. And the truth is, honestly, the world is not going to change during this lunch that we're having over these wings. Neither of us is in the, is in the special ops room where these decisions are being made. Neither of us are, the back rooms of Congress or wherever. And so what if we could just kind of keep talking where each of us can say what we really think? Neither of us has to give that up. But we can actually have a conversation. Why do we have to be mad about it?
Yeah, I think that was the moment, that was the actual thing where, like, I'm mad. I'm legitimately mad. And this friend of mine just wasn't. That was the, like, why am I so mad about this? And he's not.
Can I add something super important?
Yeah.
some of us have lives where we can talk about these important moments as though they are hypothetical, or as though the impact of them affects other people, or it will affect us down the road.
Yeah.
And I just do want to name these things that we call issues. For some people, it's about their survival. For some people, those things are about how they get to exist in the world. And here's the thing, I still think we need to have the conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do want to just name, sometimes those conversations are a lot higher stakes.
Yeah. And there is such a, oh, sorry, Jim, go ahead.
I think one of the things that shifted for me along the way was there are some conversations that I have where the content is a right or wrong conversation, but far more often I use the imagery of the three blind men and the elephant all the time. They each have a part of the elephant, the ear, the ear, the leg, the tail, and each is describing what they see with conviction and passion, as if this is the whole truth. And what they're describing is real. It's like this is what's true.
Yeah.
It's just not all.
Yeah.
And so often it's not that we're talking about something that's right or wrong. It's that I have a different perspective than you do. And if I could listen enough to you to hear your perspective, I might see more of the whole, which makes me a wiser, more loving kind of person. And when I made that shift, sometimes that's the question will come up. Is this a right or wrong conversation? Or am I just sharing my perspective and resisting hearing his or hers?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Well, we could do this for a long time, right, Kurt?
Yeah. You want to bring us home, Chris?
That wasn't why I said that. But yes, I do. Like, we're really grateful, Jim and Trisha, for the contribution that you've made to the world, and for the contribution, the part that you've played in our lives, and even the learning, the transformation that we've experienced marches its way back to you. So thanks for the time and energy today. We've mentioned the leader's journey, and how can people get in touch with you if they would like to engage coaching with the two of the preeminent coaches in the continental United States of America? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, let me say a couple of things about that. One is we are part of a 13-person team. We have a fantastic team. And so that's just important for people to know. The best thing, just go to our website, theleadersjourney.us. You can get our podcast there. You can look at some of our resources, including we always have a free resource there that you can download and so forth. Take a look at our team. And then there are several forms you can fill out to get more information or to let us know what you're thinking. So that's the best way.
And we'll put a link to that in the description of this episode.
Perfect.
Well, and just one more thing to say. I appreciate your affirmation of us. One of the things about coaching is it's always like I've learned so much from you guys. Just being in relationship,
absolutely,
it's never a one-way street, and we are so grateful for the long-standing relationship that we've been able to have with you guys. Really grateful for the opportunity to be together today.
Yeah, and excited for the work y'all do.
Yep.
Thanks for that.